What's up, you guys? In this video, I want to show you guys a strategy very briefly on how you can utilize dedicated lanes to create a more steady and established work ethic as a dispatcher, as a freight dispatcher. First of all, if you jumped into this video but you have not yet watched the first 6 videos of this course, please jump right back out of this video and go watch those videos in chronological order. So you're going to want to watch video number 1 first, then number 2, right, number 3. You guys get the idea, all the way to number 6, so that you can create a foundational understanding before you watch this video. Because if you watch it without watching the first 6 videos, you're going to be confused. So again, in this video, we're going to talk about dedicated lanes. So just to kind of reemphasize what a dedicated lane is, let's say you had a carrier, you're established with them, they're set up with you, and now you're booking them loads day by day. Well, day by day means that you're going on the load board and you're seeing what's available for that day, depending on where your carrier is at. Sometimes you might book them a day in advance. Sometimes there's people who book 2 days in advance if they're able to, maybe even 3. I never recommend to book too far out because if anything goes wrong with any of those loads, it'll throw you into a mess, and it's happened to me a few times. So again, the most effective and most easy way to operate as an independent freight dispatcher is if you're able to get your hands on a dedicated lane and find a carrier to operate and run that dedicated lane. All you're doing is handling the paperwork, but you're not necessarily having to dispatch your carrier day by day, because a dedicated lane is typically picking up from the same pickup location and dropping off at the same drop off or delivery location, and it's usually always the same commodity and weight and everything like that. So you don't necessarily have to dispatch your carrier because they're going to the same location, depending on how many days per week they're doing it or whatever, however the dedicated lane is established. But that's what a dedicated lane is. Now, let me explain to you that as an independent freight dispatcher, something that I explained in the course, which is why I said if you didn't watch it, go watch those 6 videos first. Something I explain is you have your shipper right here, right to the left. If you can see on the whiteboard example, you have your freight broker, then you have your dispatcher, then you have your carrier. Now, a load is going to go a load is going to be shipped in this order. So a shipper has a load, it needs to get it shipped out. If it does not have already if the shipper does not already have an established contract with a carrier, they're going to look for the load to be expedited or to be shipped out, within a couple of days. They're going to contact a freight broker. Now, the freight broker and the shipper, they're going to negotiate a rate and then land, a negotiation on that rate. Now the freight broker possesses that load. Now that freight broker is going to look for a carrier to operate or, to fulfill that load, right? So when the freight broker finds a carrier, obviously the carrier runs the load and the broker kind of just facilitates that load until it's accomplished. Now, again, I know I explained this in the course, but just to re-emphasize, you as the dispatcher right here, you operate as an administrative representative for that carrier. You operate as an independent contractor. You're not an employee. You're your own separate business, and you are performing administrative duties for that carrier. Now, the dispatcher does not have the legal right to negotiate anything with the shipper because you need a license. You need a freight forwarder broker's license in order to negotiate with the shipper. So the broker is allowed to do that. But because you are an independent freight dispatcher representing the carrier, you are what is defined as a bona fide agent for that carrier. So you have the right to negotiate with the freight broker concerning any loads, and that's your job, right? You're communicating with the freight broker to get loads for your carrier. Now, shippers are typically the ones with the, shippers start off as the entities or the individuals who have this dedicated lane. They either work it out directly with a carrier, or again, they'll go through a freight broker. Now, because again, as a freight dispatcher, you have access to be able to legally negotiate with the broker who possesses that dedicated lane, because they negotiated it with the shipper, is going to look for a carrier to operate it. But if they're dealing with you, because you represent that carrier, now you have the ability to take hold of that dedicated lane and present it to other possible carriers if you're not set up. Let me give you an example. Let's say you went on the load board every day. Let's say you had a carrier who was based out of Columbus, Ohio, right? And you wanted to establish a dedicated lane for that carrier. You would go on a load board, type in Columbus, Ohio as your origin destination, and this is my recommendation. You begin to call maybe 10 to 15 brokers per day, and you ask the brokers, hey, I have a dry van. Let's just say the equipment type for your carrier was a dry van. You say, hey, look, I have a dry van in Columbus, Ohio area. They're looking to run, whatever, 3 to 5 days a week. They want to stay relatively local. Are there any dedicated lanes that fit this criteria? Now, not every broker is going to have a dedicated lane, but if you consistently call, eventually you'll stumble across a dedicated lane. Now, this is what you do when the broker has that dedicated lane. And let's say they say, oh, yeah, we have something coming out of Columbus, Ohio 5 times a week going, wherever, 200 miles out. Let's say Louisville, Kentucky. From Columbus, Ohio to Louisville, Kentucky, we have it leaving 5 days a week. So what you do is you say, okay, you negotiate it. You come upon, you negotiate a rate that is fine. And that your carrier is going to be satisfied with. You take that dedicated lane, you present it to your carrier. Once you get the carrier signed onto that dedicated lane, now all you're doing is facilitating those loads. You're handling all the paperwork. But do you see where the difference is? The difference is that you are not dispatching individually per day, so it makes your job 10 times easier, which is why I always recommend to just try to establish dedicated lanes with your carriers to make your job more easier. So this is how you can do that, right? You get on the load boards and you call these brokers, and you fish around for a dedicated lane dependent on where your carrier is at. Once you come across a dedicated lane, let's say I'm gonna use this as an example. I had somebody email me saying they have a lane going from Northampton County, PA, to West Long Beach, one way, 900 or best offer, 5 per week. It's 112 miles. This is what you do. You take that and you copy it, right? Now, I remember I showed you guys how to run email in my video where I say how to get drivers. I show you guys how to run email campaigns. So whether you're using a third-party company, whether you're using the same company you created your business website from, whatever you're using, any software or online service that allows you to run email campaigns, you're going to want to go get your email list ready. Remember how I showed you guys how to do that in the how to get drivers video? You're going to do the same thing, the same process. You're going to get your drivers ready. You're going to come in here, right? And when you're ready to send the emails,